everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of Death Space Filling the Void. Only 2 more episodes left this season, including this one. And then it'll be time for my other podcast, That Gives Me Anxiety, to run its 2nd season. I'm recording now during a little bit of a thunderstorm. I feel like I say that every week. It doesn't seem like it rains that much, but I guess it's like, oh, it's raining. I better go inside and podcast. Well, it's actually helping me getting out of weeding the mulch beds in the front of the house. It's just an awful chore. It's awful. It's guaranteed that I will have a back injury tonight if I go back out there. That's not fun at all. Just raking around. You got to pick it all up, otherwise it regrows. Not interested. I have the door closed to the room that I'm recording this in, and I can hear Ollie just bumping his nose into the door to get in. He doesn't like being left out. I guess it is also fitting that there's thunder and lightning going on, because today's episode is about the end of the universe. That would have been a good time for thunder to come in, but we didn't get it. In this episode, I spoke with Charles Liu, who's an astrophysicist at the American Museum of Natural History and also the City University of New York. I spoke to him last June, and I was so excited to get him because I enjoy listening to Star Talk, Neil deGrasse Tyson's podcast about space and this and that, they answer all these crazy questions that just blow my mind, and Charles has such a calming demeanor, but he's also wildly intelligent. So the perfect person to talk to about the end of the universe. In fact, I remember doing a pre-interview with him while walking Ollie through Prospect Park last summer. We started talking about ghosts, and Charles will go there with you. Charles is certainly open to talking about stuff that may be a little bit outside the box, which is so fun. This is a podcast that is about death, dying, grief, and life, and understanding our world is a part of it. I think when you're able to absorb the fact that science is telling us that our universe will end, that it's finite, even though it happens for such a long way down the road, doesn't that have an impact on your life? I think it certainly has on mine. In a good way. It reminds you how small everything is and how small our problems can be. Not that we should allow bad things to happen, but I think you get what I'm saying. I initially recorded this episode for season 2 of That Gives Me Anxiety, and it'll still be a part of that. But I think it fits in so well with Death Space. And how often do you get an astrophysicist time to ask them questions? It's so fun. Well, I don't want to hold up anymore. I don't want to waste any more time. If you're liking the show, please remember to rate and review it, and check the show out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. That's my running bit, I guess. And now it's time to talk about the end of the universe. I wasn't getting the thunder that I wanted. Created my own. As always, thank you so much for listening, and enjoy. Now joining me on the podcast, I'm very excited to have him, is Mr. Charles Liu. He's a professor of physics and astronomy at CUNY Staten Island and an associate in astrophysics at the American Museum of Natural History. Charles, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm such a big fan of yours. I listen to Star Talk quite a bit, and so I'm thrilled to be chatting with you here about the end of the universe.
The end of time, the end of days, the end of nights, the end of all there is.
Yeah, it's interesting that this is something that causes myself anxiety, and I'm sure other people as well. Just like the end of everything is just such a daunting thing to ponder, I guess.
It is. It's kind of weird because we always think about in astronomy how the universe began, right? Mm-hmm. And then we hit sort of a scientific barrier where we can have a lot of good ideas and educated guesses based on our scientific research, but in the end, there's a point at which we just can't prove anything. And since science, fundamentally, the difference between scientific and non-scientific knowledge is whether or not you can make predictions that you can eventually confirm or refute using experimentation, observation, simulation, things like that. We wind up hitting sort of the limits of science. And the same is true at the end of the universe too. If we go on and on and on in time, what will happen, right? And we
Mm.
just can't prove anything we say. We can extrapolate based on what we know scientifically or what we've figured out. But what will really happen at the end is still wide open to speculation.
And that's because there's just too many variables, and we don't fully understand things like dark matter, dark energy. There's just too much going on there.
Yeah, that's the key word there. Just too much, right? Uh, yeah, but we're getting closer. We have some understandings of what's happening, right? We understand now, for example, that the need to balance the amount of dark matter and dark energy, and then the visible matter and energy in our universe, determines whether or not our universe expands forever,
Hmm.
whether it stops expanding at an infinite time, which is almost like expanding forever, but just a little bit different. And
Right.
then there's the thing where it stops expanding and starts to collapse upon itself as the gravity of the universe winds up making it a reversing kind of activity. So,
Ooh.
yeah, we're pretty sure now that that's not going to happen. Now, the universe, if it had a bunch more matter than it has actually now, then you could wind up not only with a big bang at the beginning of the universe, the beginning of time, but something that turns into a big crunch at the end of time. And you wind up with everything collapsing back to a single point again. But that is not how our universe appears to work. We don't have nearly enough matter in the universe to do that. Instead, we have all this extra energy, which
Mhm.
we don't know what the origin of it is, but it seems to be connected with how much volume of space there is in the universe. And as a result, we keep getting driven further and further in the expansion. And therefore, it looks like the universe will expand as long as time goes on.
Oh, wow. So you mentioned the one of the theories about how the universe might end is what you mentioned, and you've rejected that notion of the cyclical Big Bang. Some of the other ones are the Big Rip
Mm-hmm.
and the Big Freeze. Everything's got to have big attached to
Yeah.
it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it can be the slow, cold freeze, but that doesn't seem as exciting as the big freeze, right?
Right.
Now, the reality at this moment is that if there's no more new physics to be discovered, and of course that's a big if, right,
Right.
then the current status of the universe is such that it will continue to expand as long as time goes on. When I talk about time going on like that, I'm trying to be a little bit semantically specific, right? We think of time as just sort of thing that just goes on, tick, 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 and so forth, right? And we experience time, all of us. But what Albert Einstein showed in his general theory of relativity is that time is a dimension, just like length or width or height. And as a result, uh, in our case, in our universe, time actually has a location that we can mark as zero, right?
Hmm.
And it moves forward. And so we're moving in a dimension of time. Time zero is what we call the Big Bang. And so time will just keep moving. We are moving through space and time simultaneously. It's just that what we experience of it will vary depending on how fast we're moving, how we are related to one another in terms of the physical boundaries of space and time. So if we're going to be again rigorous like this about what time actually is, then that means that time could eventually stop, right? There
Hmm.
could be a limit to it where we reach it and it's just there's nothing beyond it. And that's the end of time, right? But right now, the end of time could be either the end of the universe going on into infinity or something beyond our four-dimensional space-time causes our universe simply to dissolve or be destroyed. And that dissolution will just end time, but it will also end space,
Oh
length, width,
man,
and height. Yeah.
that's awful.
Oh, well, yes, it is. But fortunately, we don't have to worry too much about it. I do, it is funny, right? Because you've probably come across some of this literature, but I had a colleague some years ago. She is at a different campus at the City University of New York, but she studied the concept of the end of days. In other words, apocalypse, or some
Right.
disaster that ends life. And it turns out that if you look in literature, and if you look at people or psychological studies throughout history, people prefer to all go together than to all go separately. So, as a result, people in general, societally speaking, tend to prefer the idea of a universe or at the time ending, an apocalypse, something that just takes everyone all out at once.
Well, there was nothing we can do, right?
That's right.
It's
That's
just,
right. It
yeah,
just kind of happens, as
yeah.
opposed to this slow, agonizing death of this and that and the other, as everything just goes slowly and slowly colder and bigger and expanding until there is essentially nothing left. So
Every atom being infinitely far away from every other atom.
that's right. That's right.
Oh my
And that,
gosh.
yeah, it's kind of sad, right?
Yeah.
Well, the the way that the universe is going now, it looks pretty clear that first all of the stars will burn out, and then all of the atoms will disintegrate into subatomic particles.
Uh,
And then the subatomic particles themselves, things like protons, will actually disintegrate. And then all the black holes, those things that from which light can never escape, it seems, even
mhm.
those will vanish, evaporate slowly but surely. And then finally, there's essentially no structure in the universe, and the temperature just gets colder and colder, and the particles get farther and farther apart, and that's it.
You know what? I do prefer the large, epic movie collapse of the universe to that. That just sounds like just a slow, sad song that.
Yeah, yeah. On the other hand, is a very interesting thing. This is cultural too, because we, in our current 20th century, 21st century kind of culture,
Mhm.
kind of feel that a slow, cold ending is a sad and a bad thing.
Yeah.
But you can imagine certain other environments, like people who might be very meditative, or people are heading towards some Buddhist or Taoist version of nirvana, right?
Mhm.
They would prefer to have the universe just slowly turn into nothing, and just we all are one with the universe, and it's
Mm.
just peaceful and quiet and empty, right?
Yeah.
One of the Buddhist philosophies that I've heard about is that you want to become empty, right? You want to become empty of pain, empty of suffering, empty of wants and needs. And once you've achieved that level, then you have headed one step closer toward nirvana or enlightenment or something like that. So that's not necessarily a terrible thing. We just think it's a horrible, kind of sad, depressing thing because that's what we're used to. If we're not doing something, we're not achieving, if we're not getting somewhere, then somehow we are secondary or wanting or not quite living our best self.
Yeah. Well, that is a beautiful way to look at life, I think. If you are without, some of the happiest people are people who have very little in this world. And that's a very wonderful and beautiful way of making your way through the world. So,
Right. So that may be a way to sort of ease the anxiety of the universe and being gone. Yes. So we certainly don't want to go away completely. But
yeah.
if we can be philosophical about it, we can then realize also that all of the particles that make up our bodies, everything, the atoms and the molecules, they'll all go into the universe somehow.
Yeah.
Right. Right. We're not going to disappear completely in terms of our matter. Maybe the specific patterns of information or knowledge or DNA or whatever will go away, but it will all become one with this universe. And if everything else is also gone away, then we're one with the universe. Is that such a bad thing? That's okay.
Yeah, I guess not. I guess in that sense we are still all together. Well, let me ask you this. Is it guaranteed to end? Is there any way of it being
Ah.
born?
A great question. Remember, we were talking earlier about how the limits of science are what we can and cannot confirm, right?
Right.
And so many scientists have probed that next stage. After the universe gets to this point, could there be a new one? Uh,
Hmm.
can this spawn something new from this nothingness, right? It's a fascinating question. Uh, one way of thinking about it goes something like this. What were the conditions that caused the Big Bang to happen in the first place, right? If those conditions are mimicked by the conditions at the end of our universe, where
Hmm.
space and time have no meaning as we understand it today, but on some grander scale of physics, is it the, shall we say, raw materials, or is it the initial condition from which a new Big Bang might launch, a new
Ooh.
universe might be created, right?
Hmm.
Um, there is an idea which you've probably heard of, the string theory, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a sort of a version of the multiple universe or multiple dimensional kind of universe that string theory might imply, with the multiverse. And at the moment, people call it M theory because we don't know whether M stands for membranes or magic or mumbo jumbo, Mickey Mouse. We have really no idea yet what that is. But the suggestion that our space time is a four-dimensional space time, three dimensions of space and one of time. If there were such things as five-dimensional structures out in the universe, the sort of big membranes, that might be floating around in even a 10-dimensional or 11-dimensional supersymmetric bulk of some kind, not even a volume, but something beyond what we can sort of visualize. You can have two five-dimensional membranes occasionally touching each other. Imagine these membranes are like flags billowing in the breeze.
Okay.
Two flags next to one another, and they touch briefly. They kind of form an intersection, right?
Hmm.
And in the same way that, say, two soap bubbles, when they touch each other, they form a membrane between them, right?
Yes.
It may from the skin. Temporarily, those membranes, those flags that touch, might form from a five-dimensional structure an actual four-dimensional skin that temporarily is connected together.
Hmm.
And a four-dimensional structure like that might be our universe. And so when the flag stops being together, they flap again in the breeze and then they come apart. That's when the universe ends. The universe is destroyed when they come apart. And then new universes are created again every time they touch again in a different location. New universes coming into existence, going out of existence, depending on the whimsy of this multidimensional wind that's flapping our membranes in the breeze.
That makes it feel that our universe is just so flimsy, right? Like
Right.
it's such a precious and temporary thing.
That's right. That's right. And it calls into question our whole limited view of space and time, right? You and I think of space and time based purely on what we experience at any given moment. But if you imagine the lifetime of a mayfly or a bacterium or something like that, where they live for minutes or hours, and compared to them, our lifetimes are really, really long.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
can sort of say, hey, we got all the time in the world, right? On the other
Yeah.
hand,
Let's take some improv classes and really delay getting out into the real world, you know?
I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. But then you have a circumstance where which we live a century, roughly, give or take. That doesn't seem so bad. But the sun lives for 10 billion years
Right.
before it starts changing from its sort of adult, what we call main sequence lifetime, and turns into a red giant and eventually a white dwarf, things like that. So compared to a star and its main sequence lifetime, our adult lives are blink of an eye. So
Yeah.
so it's all relative, and we think of time as this absolute thing, and it's kind of depressing on some extent when we all have limited amounts of time. But really, on the cosmic scale, there are no limits to what we can think about, of what we can achieve and what we do and understand and just enjoy, I guess, and maybe comfort ourselves in knowing that maybe our time is limited on some level, but on other levels, it's really long. We got a lot going on, and we can make a difference, and then our atoms and molecules go on for a lot longer thereafter, and
Mhm.
we're just around forever and ever and ever till the end of time. Just a
Charles,
different
that's a very upbeat look at all of this. I really appreciate that because I was bringing to this conversation this like heaviness of just thinking that the joy of a baby being born is done and or everything that's good in the world. And I would say I'm generally a positive person, but yeah, there's just such a heaviness here that you don't seem to have.
Oh, well, existential dread belongs in us all to some extent, right?
Yes.
It's programmed in us biologically, genetically, socially, whatever, right? Our need to survive and to extend this thing we call life is a really important part of our existence. On
Right.
the other hand, I guess studying the universe as a professional scientist has really given me a sense of peace, of calmness or understanding. Sort of the idea that, look, I can have the crappiest day in the world, and the
Hmm.
sun will still rise tomorrow, and the Earth will still spin tomorrow. It's really okay,
Hmm.
and so that helps calm me when I think, oh man, life sucks, life is going to end, no matter what happens. But there's always something that makes life want to end, right? It's going to always happen, whether it's something physical, biological, chemical, astronomical, sociological. It's there's always that, and that's what makes life precious and fun. And so every moment or every day that we go through it and we have not ended in terms of our ability to live, that's a good day.
Yeah, totally. It is a good reminder that we're small, especially I feel like in the United States, we billow our egos to such extremes that it's a reminder that, if you didn't get the promotion, there are still black holes out there, stars, and energy that we don't even know what it is
Right.
yet.
Yeah.
There's bigger mysteries than why you didn't get promoted.
Yes, of course, we shouldn't just sort of let injustice or unkindness just go by, and we just grin and bear it or things like that, right?
Of course.
That's not what I think I advocate myself. But rather, I would say that when things happen, the fact that we can get through it and work on making them better, or just moving on and getting away from what is negative and going to what is positive, makes me feel generally pretty happy. But
Yeah.
I recognize how lucky I am. I'm a very fortunate guy. I'm doing what I love to do for career and for non-career stuff. I have a loving family. I have great social support. I have friends like you, Patrick, who can,
Yeah.
talk about stuff, and we have the connections and so on. So I recognize that I'm very fortunate, and I can see all those good things. And I want to be sure that I don't forget that things can be challenging, and we should always have that empathy and sympathy for those things.
Hmm.
But when it comes to like this sort of existential dread about the end of everything, when that rises in me, I try to comfort myself with the knowledge of the kinds of things that I've been talking about with you now, right?
Hmm.
To say, hey, it's going to be cool. The universe is still there, and the universe will always go on until
Yeah.
the time when it doesn't. At which point, that's so long from now, I'm not going to worry about it. It's all
Right. And our bodies were parts of stars
that's right.
before it was
That's
collected in
right.
this form.
Isn't that cool? I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's really a comforting thing. And I read something recently. I still have to like find the actual scientific journal articles to confirm this, but I read somewhere recently that the atoms and molecules in our bodies that make up our organs or our brains and things like that, almost none of them were the ones that we were born with.
Hmm.
So obviously, when I was born, I was a few pounds, and now I'm like 100 and a few pounds, right? So obviously, a huge amount of my mass didn't exist when I was born.
Right.
But in addition to that, as my cells and as my DNA and my genes do their thing, right? Different atoms keep coming in and replacing the old atoms that were there, and the molecules and things like that as we go in and out. Everything we breathe in, we breathe back out, right? These particles are impermanent.
Yeah.
So
It's much more
we
fluid.
right.
Yeah.
And yet somehow, even though I am made up of stuff that even a year or two or a decade ago were not part of my body, I am
Mhm.
still me.
You are?
How did that happen? Right? There's a really cool something that continues and persists despite the biological and physical exchanges that have been going on. The system appears to survive the substance.
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating necessarily for something like a soul or a ghostly presence or something like that, but I am kind of pretty excited about that idea that despite the impermanence of the things in my body, there is some semblance of permanence.
Yeah, that's
That
true.
is who I am. I have no idea when I die and that level of permanence goes away, if there's some other level of permanence which continues to exist, which I can't even imagine right now, which no scientist can yet prove,
Hmm.
that might be a nice thing to think about lasting forever. Or I don't even know what forever means, right? I mean, the sun shines only for 10 billion years. I mean,
Yeah, that's
a
true.
long time. I'm not worried about like having to change my retirement plans because the sun's going to go away behind me. But there is a variation of timescales. And so what is forever? You know, certainly it could be a lot longer than I think. And I can hang on to that and be like, yeah, that's cool.
I love it.
Are your Excel skills optimized for your current job? Do you know the basics but would like to know more? All I can think about as I'm reading this advertising copy is the ends of the universe. I'm fully immersed in it at this point. But my software tutor offers 3 levels of real-time Zoom-based courses with a live instructor. Just start peppering that live instructor with questions about the universe or physics. I guess you'd have to have a live instructor that's kind of like Michael Scott, willing to go out there on the tangents with you. They all deliver practical, functional business skills in a friendly, supportive environment. These courses will increase your marketability, whether you're an employee, job seeker, consultant, or contractor. Register at mysoftwaretutor.com and use the promo code POD20 to save 20% off all registrations. I think if the universe was going to end in, like, let's say the big freeze and there was one last human, just put their hands up and say, I won. Like a king of the hill, last man standing. Or woman. Or non-binary. Whomever it is. They're the winner. And then we've got Garnished Entertainment. Are you missing your friends? Tired of unwinding in front of the TV? Have questions about whether the big crunch or the big rip or the big freeze is going to get you? Losing your marbles ever so slightly? Yes, I think you're listening to me unraveling as my mind is somewhat blown. Shake up your night with a Garnished virtual cocktail event. Now, Garnished could definitely help you out with some universe chatter, or you're with your friends. I definitely remember growing up in like high school and smoking some weed and talking about how our universe could be an atom in a fingernail of a giant or something. And everyone just being like, oh, whoa. Shake up your night with a Garnished virtual cocktail event. I was very, very cool in high school. Shake up your night with a Garnished virtual cocktail event. Garnished Entertainment is a New York City-based mixology event company with a mission of bringing communities together through creative and entertaining virtual cocktail classes. I think I would cringe if I heard that universe chatter now. Like if you could hear the audio of that conversation. I wouldn't play it. Wouldn't play it on this podcast. Whether you're catching up with old friends, team building with colleagues, or looking for the perfect date night, Garnished would love to be your host. Let's garnish.
Charles, have I missed any other theories on how the universe may end? Is there anyone that, however silly it may be, have we touched on most of them?
Oh, well, there are a lot of them, different
Yeah.
ideas. And so it's really hard for me to sort of catalog them all. In a lot of cases, I have to go back and read the literature and see how they are linking modern scientific theories with sort of new ideas and so forth. But I would say that there is a lot of research yet to be done about
Okay.
the universe. And you had mentioned the cyclical universe.
Mhm.
There are scientific good hypotheses, which have to be confirmed and proven as theories, but there's still ideas that if you extend from what we know now, maybe the universe does go through these cycles.
Yeah.
Just don't know how. We do know that whatever cycle we're in now, scientifically, probably will go on for so long that it's okay. We won't worry about it. By the time we get to the next cycle, we will all be in this sort of cosmic other state.
Yep. Our atoms flowing into other,
essentially unrecognizable.
right, future humanoids, robots melded together. Who knows?
Humanoids and robots. We got to talk about that sometime too, right?
I'd love to.
Because of course, one day they'll take over the world, but will they do it because we want them to? And they might, right? And then we can have other things to worry about. Did you know that? All right, this is completely beyond the scope of the universe, but in the 1930s, when the Great Depression was going on, people were saying, why is so many people out of work, whatever? And there were economists that said, well, a big reason the Great Depression is happening is because there are now the advent of machines where many people's work can now be done by just a few who are running machines. And so even 80, 90 years ago, people were afraid of automation. People were afraid of becoming obsolete because of technology. And today we have the same sort of thing, right? I mean, what need do we have for humans when robots can now drive our cars,
right?
Or, tend to our fields, or keep our homes lit, or things like that. It's a fascinating sort of psychological idea about the end of humanity, not necessarily the end of the world, but will we lose connection with what we really are because technology is on the march, right? And I'm not worried about it myself, but that's in part because I use technology all the time, so I know its limitations, right? Knowledge is important. And B, I'm just an optimist, as you can tell. Whatever is good is good. Whatever is bad is bad. We'll just go.
That's easy. Let's just go get some lunch.
Let's get some lunch. Let's hang out. Let's talk. Let's record our stuff on some social media complex and go back and listen to it sometime in a few years. Go, that was funny. That was great.
Well, Charles, is there anything you think I missed, or anything else you'd like to add?
Well, let me ask you something, Patrick, which I think is really cool. And this has to do with the idea of eternity.
Okay.
Let's say the universe never ends. Let's say the universe doesn't change. Or let's take it even a step further. As you know, there are a lot of wisdom traditions and faith traditions in the world that reward the righteous with some sort of eternal paradise or long life or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, that's sort of a way, I think, that we humans have adapted over the millennia to sort of counter this existential dread, right?
Yes, that there's something waiting for us.
There's something waiting for us. So don't worry. It's okay if life sucks. Soon you will be rewarded.
Right.
Forever and ever and ever, and you'll live on forever. What does that mean? Is that a good thing? I mean, do you feel like living forever is a good thing? What would make a universe that never ends good?
That's a great question, right? Like, I think, it's a bit heavy-handed, but in a world where I live forever, I probably don't get off my couch and come record this podcast with you today on a Sunday.
In a world where we live forever, we don't bother to make podcasts.
Because you have all the time in the world. You'll get to it when you get to it.
Right. And is that a good thing?
Probably not. I'll also share, this isn't mine. It's something that I read on Reddit, that in theorizing about a living forever, that you wouldn't want to live forever because eventually you would be trapped or be caught somewhere. If you live forever and there's so much time, eventually you'd be in a building that collapsed, or something in some manner. You would then be trapped for all eternity, and that sounds like a hellscape to me.
Dang. Yeah. So the irony might be that impermanence is a more freeing thing than permanence.
I believe so.
Wow. Hey, do you remember the group Alphaville? Or have you ever heard the group Alphaville?
Yes.
From the 1980s?
Yeah.
Yeah. They hit it big in the mid-80s with a song called Big in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And then on that same album, I think, there was a song called Forever Young, which is a song that I often remember. Forever young, I want to be forever young. Do you really want to live forever? You know.
Yeah. Thank you. You have a wonderful singing voice.
Thanks. It's just, do you? And the answer probably is yeah, as long as you're having a good time.
Right.
Right? But yes, like you said, if you're trapped somewhere forever, that might suck.
It really might. It really might. Oh my gosh.
Well, I think that's just sort of my last thought on this one for now. But if I've been able to help people feel like the end of the universe ain't such a bad thing necessarily, and that it's so long from now, I wouldn't worry about it, then
Yeah.
I think we're good here.
Amen. Yeah, there's plenty of things to worry in injustices in the world, and so we could put that one on the back burner for a while.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, Charles, thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight.
I
really
was mine,
appreciate
Patrick.
it. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
of course.
Have fun, enjoy, and
Will
let
do.
me know if you want to chat more about other, death-defying cosmological things.
I would love that. Yeah. All right. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.
Man, how positive is Charles? Referencing Alphaville. Singing? It's beautiful. What a guy. Yeah. Well, thank you so much to Charles. Despite the heaviness and just how much you feel like your brain is melting a little bit when you're not in Charles's world of studying the world, that is, and you start to consider it. It's just, whew, it's a lot. Well, like I mentioned at the front of the podcast, next week's is the season 2 finale. Don't worry, there will be more episodes. In the finale, I will be talking about the loss of my grandfather, which wasn't easy. I talked about the funeral and wake and brought back Jamie Valancourt, my girlfriend, who I live with here in South Carolina, from episode 1. Yeah. And then I'll be looking to record more episodes. A little stressed and nervous about that, about next week's episode, but I think it ultimately will be really good. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you ever have any feedback or anything like that, please reach out to me on the show's social media. Always happy to talk. Other than that, have a great week, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.